Hello, I'm Helen, and I'm the person behind the bunny at Bustle and Sew. I started Bustle and Sew in 2009 and hope to offer downloadable sewing patterns that are interesting and fresh, and that I also hope will inspire you to pick up fabric and thread and produce your own piece of work, with all the satisfaction that goes with creating something unique. I love to use different techniques, and on the Bustle and Sew website you'll find patterns for hand embroidery, softies, quilting, and more, including freestyle machine embroidery, and that's the subject of this tutorial. I know that many people find the idea of changing their sewing machine settings quite scary, and perhaps they're not too confident about the whole idea of freestyle machine embroidery. I enjoy combining this technique with applique and touches of hand stitching, and I'm sure you will too once you've learned the skills you need. Like a lot of seemingly complicated processes, it's easy when you know how, and even easier when you've somebody to show you how. And that's why I've put this tutorial together for you. I can't be in the same room as you. I may even be halfway across the globe from where you live. But I hope you'll agree this is the next best thing, and you don't even have to offer me a biscuit. There are lots of different methods for this technique. There's no definitive right or wrong, but the way I'm going to show you in this tutorial works well for me. Oh, and because it's fun to create something nice as you learn, we're going to use a real project. And you can download the Country Village Tea Cozy pattern from the free patterns page on my Bustle and Sew website. The Bustle and Sew website address is www.bustleandsew.com. When you get to the home page, just open the free patterns page and you'll see the Country Village Tea Cozy pattern there. Okay, so I'm starting out with some rather nice furnishing fabric that I happened to pick up at a sale at my friend's shop. To do machine embroidery it needs to be a reasonably heavy fabric, nothing too flimsy, otherwise you'll need to use a hoop, which is a bit of an annoyance when you're putting things on and off your sewing machine with the foot. So I'll make sure that's nicely pressed, so flat on both sides, and I've lined up the bottom edge so that it's nice and straight, because I'm going to use my existing tea cozy as a template. I'm simply going to place it on here, allow about an inch border at the bottom, and I'm going to draw with a Sharpie pen. No worries about the line showing because it will disappear when I assemble the tea cozy. I'm going to draw around about half, 3/4 of an inch. Give me a nice tea cozy shape. So here's my Sharpie. Just ordinary Sharpie pen, steady hand on the fabric, and just make your template like so. If you want to, you can always trace round it onto card and then put the card on the fabric and cut it out, but that isn't really necessary with such a simple basic shape as this. So that's making your tea cozy shape, as you can see, nice and round. Now the next thing is to cut it out. Okay, so you put one of your pieces to one side and you just work on the front panel to start with. All the time you're working you must remember your seam allowance, because if your design runs off into your seam allowance you're going to lose it, which would be a pity. So you'll see I've got it here, and here is my design. It's a very simple design, just a house, a little church, a couple of trees, but it will be a really good way to show you how the whole thing works together. When you're doing applique, you work from the bottom up, so your furthest away items you put on first and secure those before moving on to those at the top. That way you get the impression of distance coming towards you. So I've cut a curve of green felt for the hill, but I'm not going to stick that down yet because I've got elements of the design that need to go in behind it. I need to put in the clouds, and also the little church stands back on the hill. So before I actually secure that to the base fabric, I need to work on these elements. Now I've printed two versions of my design. This one I'll be following, that's the right way round. This one is reversed. It's so that when I trace onto the Bonder web and turn it over, it will then be the right way up on my design. So whatever you do when you're working, don't get them muddled up. It's so easy to actually cut out shapes the wrong way round, and then you're stuck because they don't fit. So bear that in mind when you're cutting. So the first thing I'm going to do is apply the clouds behind the design. See how it works? Like so. So we need some clouds to come in. Okay, so here's my Bonder web. Bonder web has two sides to it. One is the blue side, and that's what will adhere to the back of your fabric, and the other is the paper side. And it's the paper that you draw onto so that you know what you're doing when you cut out your shapes. So I place the Bonder web on top of my back to front design, smooth it down, work as economically as possible, and then with my Sharpie again, I like my Sharpie, I simply trace the shape. Now when you come to where shapes cross over with your fabric, you need to allow it to have a little bit behind so that you can't see any of the background fabric. So I would actually cut that fabric right down to here. See, I'm marking it in a dotted line so you can see for the underlap. Okay, so that's my first cloud. I can move it along a little bit. Now this cloud I think sits on top. So I'll move the Bonder web up so that I can make the most economical use of it. Don't throw away those little bits, they'll be handy for little shapes later. So again, a solid line is the edge that will show, and then where it goes behind, see it's underlapping the house, and on this side I can just see a little bit of that cloud. Might not be the most economical way of doing it, but it shows you my ideas. And then finally the big cloud. Again, that's the line that will be seen, so nice curve. I'll make that go out a bit there. And that's the bit that will underlap with the house, and it will also have the church and the tree, and it will go under the green felt. Right, so put that Sharpie away. Always put the lid back on your Sharpie. I've had so many blobs of ink on fabric through not putting the lid back on. So cut out the Bonder web. Good. Just quite roughly at this stage. I know you shouldn't use your shears for this, and I go through so many pairs of shears, but luckily there's a nice man lives in the village who does sharpening. So I visit him a lot for my very sloppy cutting habits, but I'm always in too much of a hurry to go away and look for paper shears. Right, so again, trim to the edges. And what I always do at this point, I don't know whether you're supposed to or not, it's just the way it works for me, I make a cut into the shape. because I find when it comes to peeling the fabric off, it works so much better. But anyway, you'll see what I mean. Now, here's my first cloud fabric. It's just an ordinary quilting weight cotton. Happens to be a fat quarter I had in my stash. So I've ironed it. I shall press that again. There's no creases, because you don't want creases coming into your design or you're lost. Okay, so that goes on there. Show up those selvage edges. And then a simple press is sufficient to secure the bonder web to the fabric. Just a few seconds, you don't need to iron, just press and the glue will melt. Okay, so again, just cut up there. And then along the dotted line. Now at this point, it's easier to turn the fabric to get a smooth curve. Work your scissors right in as far as they'll go, and then try and cut the curve in one single motion. If you can't, carefully go in again. And that's your first cloud. Okay, so that's all my cloud shapes cut out. I've peeled the bonder web off the back and I'm fairly sure I'm happy with the positioning. You can see a little gap there, but that's absolutely fine. That will be covered by the house when I put it on. So now I'm happy with my background. I'm going to take my iron and the point of no return, whoops, I'm going to press them down onto the background fabric. This is a pressing movement, not an ironing movement. Ironing might make them shift. I tend to use the steam, I don't know quite why. I think I should say all the way through, this is my way of doing things. It may or may not be the right way, but it works for me. Okay, so that's the clouds in place. If you refer back to our original right way round template, you can see that we're building up the shape of the clouds. Now it doesn't matter if they overlap a bit at the back, we can trim that back at the end. The important thing is that the base fabric is covered. Okay, so here's my hill again. It's giving me a baseline to work from. Put the reverse to one side. Now the next thing to do is, if you look at the little church, it's actually slightly behind the hill. So we're now going to put the church together, and that's going to sit on the design like so. So the first thing to do is to select some suitable fabrics to cut out the shape.